يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program. It's a Wednesday morning and as always, great to be with you. And as always, lots of interesting topics that we're going to be unpacking on the show this morning. We're going to be looking at lupus and Dr. Faeeza Nawab will be in studio talking about the condition, and she herself suffers from the condition. So we're going to get it right from the horse's mouth. We're also going to talk about the People's Fund. But right up first on the show this morning, we're going to start off on a very serious note by talking to Dr. Nazim Abrams about that horrid scourge on society, and that is addictions. He runs his own drug rehab center in Willow Park, Roodepoort, Johannesburg, and he's here to talk about the scourge of drugs in our communities, in society as a whole, and what would be, inshallah, the right approach for rehabilitation and getting your loved one back home safe and healed. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome, and we're going to talk about something we don't like to discuss, something we don't like to hear about. It's something we'd like to kind of turn away and talk about, change the subject, because it's painful. It's ugly, it's a dark world, and very especially if you have a loved one that is suffering addiction, I think only you will know the pain, the heartache, the anxiety, the stress, and the sleepless nights that you experience when you have a loved one in addiction. So we're going to talk about addiction, why people get addicted, and then that long, hard, slow road to recovery. Who is Dr. Nazim Abrams? Assalamu alaikum once again and welcome.
Jazakallah. Very interesting topic, and a topic that I hold very dear to my heart, simply because I think it's relatively important for society to understand, for people to understand that addiction is an addictive personality that is in its progressive nature, into a negative progressive nature. Now when you're talking of a personality disorder, and it's important for us to understand it from that concept, or from that standpoint. Because the minute you talk about rehabilitation, immediately we focus on the physical addictions. So immediately when you talk about rehabilitation, immediately when you talk about addiction, immediately the mindset or the thinking is drugs and alcohol. When drugs and alcohol in reality is just the end result of the problem. So if you look at the various types of addictions, and I'd like to mention that to start off with, because we need to understand, particularly when we talk about that long, hard journey, not only for the addict or for the person that's addicted, but also for the person that is codependent, and also for the person that is enabling, and they don't even realize that.
Okay, so what is codependent and what is enabling?
Right. Codependency is when one is completely dependent on the other. So if you take a parent, for example, a parent always wants to give a child the best. There's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely, I'm a parent first too. And you want to give your children always the best. In fact, you want to give them better than what you've ever had. What we fail to understand or think about is, does those children have the ability to cope with what we're giving them, to start off with? If they don't, we're already taking away, or we're crippling them from removing from them a personality where they would not be able to have self-discipline, they will not have appreciation, they will have no value system.
And not be able to make the right choices.
And obviously not make the right choices. So if you're looking at family values, morals and ethics, automatically you start dabbling around with those three very important aspects in life. which is morals, values, and ethics. So the minute you lose a value system, the ethical side of it is already in place and the moral side is already in place. So when you look at, and we're talking about codependency, so if you look at codependency, then I would give my child whatever he or she wants, despite the fact that I can't even see, or I'm blinded by seeing that I'm not allowing them to be able to develop a true value system. And I like to use the analogy of shoes, for example. Growing up many years ago, it would be evident that, you know, and it's not because we came from poor homes, but you would have, for example, 2 pairs of shoes for a year. Okay, and it will be a pair of shoes for school and it will be a pair of shoes for Eid. And the Eid shoes you'll have to put away for the second Eid.
If it fits you then.
If it still fits you. Okay, the point there was that we had a value system.
True.
In order for those shoes to last, you had to make sure it stayed clean, you had to make sure it stayed polished, it was always shining, it was well looked after. You developed a value system. But if you have 10 pairs of shoes in your cupboard, there's absolutely no value system. I promise you, I don't even think the shopping centers or the shops or the supermarkets sell shoe polish anymore. Because people have so many pairs of shoes, there's absolutely almost no need to actually polish your shoes. So if a pair of shoes is dirty, you put on another pair. You know, so automatically the value system goes out there, and I use that as an analogy. The problem that I've had in my experience and through therapies, I found that in most cases, parents do that to make themselves feel better because they had issues, because they had difficulties, because they went through trials and tribulations. So they want better for their children, which there's nothing wrong with. But they're not dealing with the issue in the correct manner, their issues in the correct manner. They're now living their lives through the lives of living their children's lives through their eyes. So they want to give their children what they didn't have. So they're really giving the children because they want to give the children, but it's to make them feel better. And because it's making them feel better, they continuously do so.
And also thinking that this is the way they're expressing their love to their child. So the more I give, the more accepted I'll be, the more I'll be loved, and the more my child will see just how much I value him and I love him.
Correct. But that value system is completely misunderstood. So if we take that and we correlate it with the addictive personality that is now in its progressive nature, then codependency the codependency turns to enabling. Now the enabler, who could very well be the same person who's codependent, and both enabling and codependency is addictions of its own nature. So now we're looking at one home structure that we have an addiction twicefold. So there's dual addiction in one home structure. But the one addict is looking upon the other addict, because the one addict is oblivious to the fact that they are addicts, or they have an addiction problem, which is enabling or codependency. But they're focusing on the child that's taking drugs because that is more prevalent or more relevant and more obvious at the time, and more destructive at the time. But I think they're equally destructive anyway, because the one feeds the other. Because that child will not be able to continue his physical addiction if he was not enabled. And if there was no codependency, then I would not be giving my child to make me feel better and telling myself it's to make my child feel better.
But the problem obviously is parents think that they're doing the right thing. They're also afraid, and we all know, we've done many such programs in the past as well, is that addicts are very manipulative. They threaten all the time. And mothers especially are afraid of losing their children. So when the addict starts manipulating and saying, if you're going to put pressure on me, I'm going to leave the home. If you put pressure on me, you're not going to see me anymore,
Emotional
et cetera,
blackmail.
Absolutely. And then the parents or the loved ones or the wife caves in and just keeps quiet about it and continues the enabling. Unfortunately, in enabling behavior. Let's just change tack here slightly and let me ask you this question. Dagga has been obviously decriminalized in South Africa, and it has been so in lots of Western countries, lots of states in America as well. What do you believe? You've been running your centre, the Lighthouse, what's it called, Lighthouse on the
Lighthouse
Horizon?
on the Horizon, yes.
And that's in World Road Park, Johannesburg. You've been running it for the past 14, 15
14
years.
years, yes. Going on
How
to
do you
15.
believe the decriminalisation of dagga is going to impact the world of drugs and addicts? Is it going to increase? Is it going to truly, as they tell us, it's the gateway drug, is it truly going to open that gate and have a proliferation of young drug addicts coming into the world?
Absolutely. When this took place, the first question I asked was, where is the people making this decision to see the effects that dagga has on a human being? I have, in the last 6 months, have undoubtedly referred people for psychiatric evaluations and psychiatric treatments that was only using dagga. The psychosis, the induced psychosis that comes from dagga is by far one of the most dangerous and the most prevalent. So I can't for the life of me understand how they could even have thought of doing that. And not only, to answer your question, not only is it going to increase the drug situation in the country, but it's also making it easier. And for the life of me, I don't understand how they even think they're going to be able to have control of it. So now they're saying that it's legal, but you can only use it at home. So now I'm at home and I'm growing it and I'm using it.
So you're
but I get into my car and I drive from point A to point B and I'm as high as a kite and I endanger everybody on that journey. So how are they going to have a control of it? With alcohol, we could do a breathalyzer test and you'll have a situation with the law. How are they going to determine the cannabis usage? It's impossible. And then they utilize the fact that cannabis has its healing qualities. Now I am and have a degree in homeopathology where I focus, and my focus point is on alternate healing. And I agree completely. But there is procedures in place for that. And there's processes in place for that. They're not understanding. I mean, the minute that this situation started, I can tell you, I can count on both my hands and my feet, and I'll still be counting. Everybody's opening up little businesses to start creating cannabis oil.
I've heard of that phenomena as well.
Yes.
Let's go for our first ad break. We'll be back with you in a minute or two. Dr. Nazim Abrams is here. He's from the Lighthouse on the Horizon Drug Rehabilitation Centre based in World Road Park, Johannesburg. Talk to us about the dark world of drugs and addictions. Dr. Nazim Abrams is my guest. He's from the Lighthouse on the Horizon Drug Rehab Centre in World Road Park, Johannesburg. We're talking addictions and everything, all the dark things that goes with addictions. Nazim, you often hear people saying and talking about different drug rehab centres and always suggesting that that's not a good centre. My son or daughter went in there and 2 months after coming out of there, he or she relapsed. They don't do their work, they're just taking our money, etc., etc., etc. Or that's the best rehab centre. But it's not about the rehab centre, isn't it? It's about the drug addict making the choice. Tell us about your experiences.
I have a very great concern with that, because I have an opinion, and my opinion is that every treatment center is a good treatment center to start off with. And I say that, and I can make a statement by saying that because I do believe that the Department of Social Development is involved with making sure that before a treatment center is registered, that they comply and apply themselves. So we cannot blame a treatment center when a person does not comply or apply himself within the treatment center. And then there's this perception of also thinking that the person is ready or is not ready, or when a person is ready. I have another opinion on that matter, is that when we're talking about addiction and you're talking about a person who's chemically imbalanced, emotionally unstable and unavailable, such a person has by far long given up the power to reason. So there's no way that person's ever going to be able to have power to be able to reason and make the relevant and prevalent decision to be able to go to rehab to start off with. So what happens when a person actually gets to a rehabilitation point or get to the rehabilitation center is when there's a crisis. So either I'm in the process of losing my job, or I've been caught for possession and I've got an altercation with the law, or my wife's walking out of the door already, or my mom and my dad is beside themselves and they're throwing me out of the door. So there's a crisis. It is at that point when the addict or the addictive personality now finds a little bit of power to reason. And they would now utilize and manipulate the situation. So, okay, I know my mom wants me to go to rehab, so you know what? I'm in so much trouble right now. All I know she wants to hear is that I want to go to rehab. So now if a minute I say, Mom, I have a problem, I want help, I need to go to a rehab, automatically the spotlight goes completely off the relevant and prevalent stuff, and it's like, here's a miracle. Let's focus on getting the person to rehab. In the meantime, that person's only shifting focus and manipulating the whole situation.
He's probably going for a bit of a holiday in the rehab center.
Unfortunately, and you couldn't have said that better, because I mean, you find people going to rehab at least twice, thrice a year. So he's spending 3/4 of the year in a rehabilitation center and a quarter of the time out working or being at home with the family. So what is that person doing in a rehabilitation center? He's lazing around. He's manipulating the system. I have, with Lighthouse, for example, we have a very specific rule that we now, at this point, started to focus very, very assertively on. That if by the second or the third time at most you relapsed, we refer you completely.
So you refer the patient where to?
Either to psychiatric evaluations or to state rehabs, where parents don't have to pay for the situation. And not only because of a financial constraint or because of financial situation, but also because it is at that point where they will be able to realize that this is not working because the person is not allowing it to work. You see, or
there could be a psychiatric problem as well.
In most cases, yes. In most cases, yes. The underlying factors are just too strong. The addictive personality has been for too long in a progressive nature where learned behaviors has become so overpowering that it becomes virtually impossible for the person to unlearn those behaviors because all attitudes and behaviors are learned.
And the addict thinks that he or she is in control. They are in control anyway, but they believe they don't have a problem. You the problem, they don't have
Correct.
a problem. You imagining it and you exacerbating it by nagging them all the time. So as far as they're concerned, they don't have a problem. They are in control. You the mad one.
But you must remember that's a fact for them at that point in time because the emotional and psychological state of mind is of nature that they have developed a false frame of mind and a faulty belief system. So what we see or perceive or what we see or know as a total negative for them is a total positive. And it's their fact, it's their reality. And it's difficult for the person that's reasoning to understand that because it's almost like you're looking at a madman. You understand? But that is a reality for that person at that point in time. And one needs to be able to understand that. And I urge parents to realize that, particularly when they say they're doing this because they love their children, they need to ask themselves, who are they loving? Because their children have by far already allowed themselves to become somewhat of a different person or somewhat of a person that they're not.
Now, Nazim, I know that the Lighthouse is offering a slightly different approach, or you take a slightly different approach in your healing of the patients. Why is that, and what is this different approach all about?
Well, for one, we're talking about chemical imbalances. We're talking about emotional and psychological disorders. We're talking about attitudinal and behavioral disorders, all resulting along the psychology. So, if we're talking about chemical imbalance, for example, one needs to ask where's this chemical imbalance coming from, which is obviously a state of the brain. So. Where is it stemming from? Is it hereditary to start off with? Let's go there. Is it hereditary? Is it toxicity? And obviously 99% of the time we find that it is toxicity. So toxicity meaning that what we eat, what we drink, what we're breathing in. And then we go and we dabble with chemicals. So there's pharmaceutical chemicals, and then there's street chemicals. So for example, if you take pharmaceutical drugs that your doctor, your normal GP is putting you on, could have adverse effects, which would not necessarily be a very positive thing for you to take. I'm not against it, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be taken. What I am saying is that if that toxicity level is not watched, it will become a danger to that particular person who has a personality disorder to start off with. When we say personality disorder, we're talking of an attitudinal and behavioral disorders, which has now resulted into a character disorder, which resulted into a false frame of mind and a faulty belief system.
And obviously street drugs plays a huge part in this total change in personality.
Absolutely.
The irrationality, the fact that the person can't even reason. Just talk us through that. And I know you've been on this journey. You're going to share a little bit of that with us. And here you are totally healed, running your own center. So you've been there, done that. You've walked that path, and you speak with the utmost of authority.
So if you look at the addictive personality, and that is in its progressive nature from a very young age, okay, which is clearly based on influence. And the influence would be in your surroundings, your growing up surroundings. So I'm not necessarily saying that the home is a negative home, but by virtue of the individual not having the adequate coping skills or dealing appropriately with the situations and the events that he's surrounded by, that addictive personality will then progress completely to the negative state, which will allow that person's chemical imbalance disorder to be enhanced. To the point where that false frame of mind and faulty belief system, which will allow that person then to act out a lot more aggressively, a lot more negatively. And if that person is not receiving or achieving what he sets out to achieve, then it will bring in depression. And it will cause that person to go into a depressive state. But it's all induced. It's induced by that toxicity levels that's creating that chemical imbalance. So in the lighthouse treatment, we focus, or our focal point is attitudinal and behavioral disorders to start off with.
How big is the aspect of spirituality in the healing of the addict?
I think spirituality, in my very humble opinion, plays at least 80% out of 100% in any recovering process. And I think that's where a great deal of most successful treatment centers would agree with me. Because we often say, without Allah in your heart, in your mind, you're going to go nowhere fast. And children or people don't understand that. For example, if we look at, and you can look at all the books of Torah, if any of us as human beings had followed the examples of the prophets,
the great prophets, alhamdulillah,
then we wouldn't have had the problems that we're faced with.
Okay, let's go for our next ad break. And so says the son of an imam. That's right, Dr. Abrams is the son of the late Imam Khafiling, and I'm sure most of you do have heard of him. So he comes from a very prominent family, and he's here to share his wisdom with us and to talk about the Lighthouse on the Horizon treatment facility. Next ad break, and when we get back, we'll be talking some more, inshallah. Dr. Nazim Abrams is in studio talking about addictions and recovery. Of course, we end that by saying recovery because there's always hope. And he is at the Lighthouse Recovery Center, Lighthouse on the Horizon in Wilrow Park, Roodepoort. Now, I often wonder about people running rehab centers. I often wonder about the emotional investment that people like yourself has to put into the center and the people that come there. Why do you do it?
The methodology that I work from, which is called the therapeutic community methodology, which is a very beautifully personalized treatment plan, which has come from Indonesia, Jakarta originally, and the therapeutic community program that I studied and that I used, the methodology that we apply, allows us to understand that one of the fundamental points of that is man helping man to help himself. So despite the fact that you place so much energy in, you getting back immediately. So often and repetitively I've been asked the question, don't you get tired? You're doing this so long, you're dealing with so many people's problems. The beautiful part of it is I don't work a day in my life. I wake up every morning and I go and do what I love doing.
Right.
So how can that drain you?
Is it about putting back? Is it because you've walked this journey as well? And how difficult was your journey?
Very difficult.
Your journey to recovery. Obviously,
yes, absolutely.
You're
very
a recovering
difficult.
addict.
You know, people often, and it actually upsets me sometimes. I actually kind of take it personal sometimes when I hear people say rehabilitation don't work. Then I'd like to just jump up on a table and say, look at me.
Alhamdulillah.
Look at me, and then you make that statement
Alhamdulillah.
again. Because
how long have you been clean?
Going on to 18 years almost.
And at this point in time, do you have days or times when you crave? I don't know what your drug of choice was, but do you find that you crave? And if you do, what do you do about it?
Well, as we all know, I mean, and as the psychological study goes, recovery is a lifelong process. And I totally agree with that. However, you can't live your life based and in your thinking by making it all about that. You need to live.
Absolutely.
You need to just live. And recovery should not be placed on a focus point the way society actually does. Because I have a very interesting phenomenon where I would say to you that everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created goes through a recovery process at some point of its lifespan.
I love that.
So why do you look at us or at addicts or at people with addictive personalities that unfortunately it had progressed and has gone so far into a negative space and have created a lot of damage, and we understand that. Why do we look at it so differently? Why don't we look at the snake shedding its skin differently? Why don't we look at the grass that is brown during some parts of the year and green at some parts of the year?
And the reality and the facts of life is that each and every one are addicts. I may be addicted to sugar, you may be addicted to cigarettes, somebody else might be addicted to chocolate. Then you have other addictions like gambling,
yes.
addictions
That's why I say
to sex,
addiction is a
etc.
character disorder. It's an addictive personality that is in its progressive nature in a totally negative space. Mm-hmm. So when we do, for example, we go back and talk about my journey, where I come from, a 22 hardcore year addiction. So 22 years is, in most cases, in my very humble opinion and experience in my running of a treatment center, longer than most kids that is actually in treatment.
Absolutely.
So you ask yourself, how does a person that comes from a 22-year addiction come out of it? If rehabilitation didn't work?
Where and how did you reach a point where you said, enough is enough, I'm at rock bottom, if I don't turn my life around, if I don't go and heal myself, I'm going to die?
Correct. And I appreciate that question very much, because it comes back to the enabler and the codependent. It is the enabler and the codependent that actually feeds the addict, and they don't realize that. For many, not only my own personal experience, but for many over my 14, 15 years running my own facility and 3.5 years of study. So that's 17.5, almost 18 years of being involved in this industry, and the researches that I've put in, intensive researches that I've put in, it always comes back to the same thing. The codependent and the enabler feeds the addict. That addict will only come to a point when there's a point of crisis. And the point of crisis and a point of reference for crisis for that person is when there is no more enabler and there is no more codependent.
What happened in your case?
Exactly that.
Were you kicked out of the house?
I was forced to take responsibility and accountability. I had no home, I had no family, I had nothing. I had nothing to look back to. I had a pair of shoes on my feet and a shirt on my back. I went into a rehabilitation center and a treatment center with the shoes on my feet and a shirt on my back. And no support. Today I run a treatment center, and the first thing parents ask me is, when can we visit? Who are you visiting? The same person that just stole your DVD and your DVR, and the same person that just defrauded your bank account, or the same person that just sold your car to the Nigerians. Is that the person you want to come and visit? You know, people need to have a hard look at what it is they're dealing with.
Let's look at your treatment modalities. And do you believe in the tough love approach as far as enablers are concerned? And what other treatment options do you offer? I know lots of rehab centers talk about 12 steps, etc. And you've probably encompassed that in your
within the four structure.
But you do have a
pillars.
slightly different approach. Why have you adapted your program?
Well, firstly, we look at biopsychosocial damage. So from a biological perspective, you go natural, so there's no side effects. And you're actually putting a person through a purification process, which actually at this point allows that person to detoxify and to eradicate all drug metabolic toxins and toxicity levels out of the skin tissue, fatty tissue, fat cells, right up till your hair follicle. So when you're eradicating all those toxicity levels, this now allows your biological self to enhance the emotional and psychological self, for you to start to regain the reason to have power to reason. And then obviously with you thinking better, feeling better, acting better, you'll start fixing the social structure. So you have your biopsychosocial damage, which is completely reversed through this methodology, through that first instance. Then with the actual rehabilitation process, we're looking at education. Education is power. 99% of the time, kids are experimenting. Not all. I think at least it's safe to say that 99% of children or people that is doing drugs or that has gotten involved with drugs, what was out of pure curiosity and experimenting. It is just sad that that person at that point didn't realize and didn't understand, because he didn't have the knowledge to understand his own body, to understand that he was well in his entire psychological state was well in its negative progressive nature, or the addictive personality was well in its negative progressive nature. So he didn't have the knowledge to understand that. So just one use of a chemical that altered the state of a mind was enough for him to become a full-blown addict. So the rehabilitation is really based on education. So by empowering that person with the education to understand his own body, so that he knows exactly why his body does what it does. You know, in therapy we often talk about the hand that has 5 fingers, each finger different size, different shape, but each finger has its own function. So that is the individuality that we need to look at. So often you probably, your next question would have been, then how is it that in a home of 5 kids, only 1 becomes an addict? Or 2 becomes
Just answer that very quickly, because we're wrapping up in 2 minutes' time.
So because of that individuality, we come from the same home where there's strong good values, morals and discipline and ethics involved, but because of the inadequate coping skills and the unfulfilled emotional needs on an individual level, you'll find that those that has inadequate coping skills are more subjective and more prone to the addictive personality taking over.
I'd like to end on a very positive note by saying that you are testimony to the fact that if somebody is addicted and they want to turn their lives around, alhamdulillah, they can. And it's not about a facility that's not good enough, or the facility is not good enough. I think all facilities do the best they can. They all have great programs. It's up to the individual concerned. Challenges for you, what would you like to see happening as far as the lighthouse on the horizon is concerned?
I certainly would like to see the community getting more involved pertaining funding. because there is so many people out there that actually requires and that needs rehabilitation that can't actually afford rehabilitation.
And you can accommodate just so many people at a time.
Exactly.
Because it's a costly exercise.
Yes, and I think, you know, particularly out there now, we have a lot of life coaching courses going around. We have a lot of life coaches out there. So there are alternative measures over and above rehabilitation. But in order for that to even work a lot more stronger and a lot more better, it is always prevalent for a person to start off by going through some kind of a program. And I think the Lighthouse methodology or the therapeutic community methodology is one of the most appropriate methodologies, because it's simple and it's factual and it's based on family values, morals and ethics.
And inshallah, may you grow from strength to strength. May Allah bless you for this amazing work you're doing. You're going out and trying to heal people. And even if you heal one person in a year, that one person impacts 16 or more other lives. So
Absolutely.
You are really and truly doing a marvelous job. Keep it up, and we do hope and pray that the community comes out in their droves to support you. And that's all we have for you this morning.
Shukran so much for having me on the show.
It's lovely having you. You truly enlightened us on this dark world of addiction. And that was Dr. Nazim Abrams. He's from the Lighthouse on the Horizon Drug Treatment Centre based in Willow Park, Johannesburg. And as you've heard, he's testament to the fact that if you want to heal yourself, nothing can stop you. It is a possibility. He healed himself after 22 years of addiction, and he's been clean for the past 18 years, and may he carry on, inshallah, and may he carry on touching lives in a very positive way. Time for us to take another ad break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the People's Fund with Luyanda Jafta, and later on in the show, we'll be talking to Dr. Faeeza Nawab about lupus. Welcome back, and the reason I'm smiling is our next guest is here to tell us how we can make money. So listen very, very closely. His name is Luyanda Jafta, and he is with an organization called the People's Fund. Good morning. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Right. The People's Fund, how long are you in operation, and what is it all about?
Yeah, so we've been around for about 15 months as the People's Fund, but it's a collective of companies that have a collective experience of over 15 years in the market in entrepreneurship. And what the People's Fund is basically finding a new mechanism to finance small growing businesses in the country. It's a call to action that we as the community can actually enable businesses to grow and get something back for that, right? So typically how it works, we had a campaign on our platform called for Native Nosi. She's a beekeeper, Mukhadi. And we were selling beehives to the markets, right? And we said, buy a beehive for 1,200 Rand. Native Nosi will harvest the bees from the beehive, package it and all of those things, and then sell it to the market. And every time they sell a kilogram of honey to the market, you as the crowd would earn 36 Rand per kilo of honey. And that's basically the model. We call it asset-backed crowdfunding. So in much the same way somebody would go to a bank to buy an asset that would grow their business.
Now I'm wondering, why shouldn't I just go to a bank, one of your 4 big banks in the country, rather than coming to you? Because I know that I'm safe and I'm secure with the bank.
Sure. So the first reason would be we're very flexible. So we don't call what we get back to the crowd interest, right? It's a royalty. We do a profit share with the entrepreneurs, which makes it Sharia compliant. You know?
Alhamdulillah.
What we do is we say, look, we want to model your business, and what does your business need next, right? And banking, God bless banking, but it's not designed for entrepreneurs, especially in the country.
And that's a big problem with young upcoming entrepreneurs. The big problem is they bemoaning the fact that banks are not giving them loans. Yeah. So how do you encouraging entrepreneurs,
Yes.
but there isn't a platform for them to go to for support.
Exactly. So these are one of the things we're trying to change. So people can contribute on our platform to buy somebody an asset from as little as 100 rand, right? So there is an element of risk because you are backing a small business, right? But how we circumvent...
How do you protect it?
How do we protect that risk is by allowing, we say the crowd owns the asset and the entrepreneur is basically leasing the asset for a period of time. So like the campaign...
So no collateral or anything?
No collateral. The asset itself is the collateral. And if the entrepreneur goes out of business or the business fails, we simply take back the asset and sell it back in the market, and the crowd gets whatever is remaining on that particular asset.
And obviously this is all above board and done legally. All sorts of contracts are drawn up and signed.
Exactly. So it is. So we've had, for example, offline close to 600 applications, on the actual platform maybe 120. We've only done 13 campaigns because we do a thorough due diligence. We're not trying to say that financing, we're just going to let anybody just come onto the platform. We sit with the business. We look at their historical trading history. We look at where the gaps are to enable them to grow by looking at their financials and looking at, so a lot of entrepreneurs are contract manufacturing with somebody else, right? And it's a heavy cost on the cost of sales for their product. So what we try to do is say, if we bought you this piece of equipment, you'd minus this cost a lot. And then that saving you make, you share it with the crowd. Right, and that's...
What percentage of saving do you share with the crowd? So
we always model it based on what each business needs. So we don't say we have a set rate that you're sharing this much with the crowd. That's the first level. We say we need to make it viable for the entrepreneur, but also for the crowd, so that the crowd can earn, let's call it a return, right?
Of course. No one, I mean, you're not going to,
sure.
It's always a what's in it for me.
Definitely.
But I also would like to know at the end of the day, what is it I'm going to be paying back?
Sure.
Because it's got to make perfect good business sense for me.
Definitely. So what we always do is we look at first affordability. What can your business afford, right? And we peg it against your sales. So we don't say you're paying 10,000 Rand per month. We say you're paying 50 Rand for each liter of water you sell, right? So it's always tied to your cost of sales. And the crowd comes in well knowing that some months they might do less than that and some months they might do more. But what it means is you share in the risk and you share in the reward as well. So that's the model. And generally speaking, our models have worked almost close to 100%. We've been lucky on the projections we've done, because you know, numbers tell a story. Historical numbers tell a beautiful story of how a business can expect to do. Of course, allowing for systemic problems like really bad recession or things like that. But generally, the numbers do tell a story, and then the entrepreneurs have performed really well. I mean, in the 13 to 15 months, I'm just trying to count in my head, we've raised over 3 million for entrepreneurs. Over 20% of that has been paid back to the crowd already, you know, from people contributing as little as 100 Rand.
So who are these people that you're talking about, and how do they come on board? Not the entrepreneurs, the people that are funding the entrepreneurs.
These people are you and I. It's everyday people who are saying, look, could I do more in the country first and foremost, you know? Can I get a better than, let's call it, fixed deposit rate of return, right? And some of our campaigns have given back, if we're using the return perspective, an annualized return of 20% on their capital they put out. Because the entrepreneurs are performing really well. And how they get onto they go onto the people.co.za and they sign up and look through the campaigns we have and pick one that resonates with them, you know.
So you've got about 13 that you're busy with currently, and they're probably very diverse. Tell us about them, and what is it about those 13 entrepreneurs that you guys, and I know you did due diligence, etc., but what was it about those 13 that stood out for you and the rest of the panel? Because it's not only you, Luyanda, that makes that call.
Definitely. So there's a whole vetting process, like you said, with the due diligence. But the things we like to look at is, firstly, does this have export opportunity? Right? Because our ambition is to change the perspective of the country. We have a 50% poverty rate in South Africa,
Yes.
right? And how you change that is with creating jobs. And entrepreneurs can create jobs, but job creation is a byproduct of running a productive company. So we look at, can you export and bring money into the country? That's the first thing. And then secondly, do you have the potential to create primary unskilled jobs, right? And because we think that's currently important right now, because we can discuss innovation forever and ever, but when you have a workforce that's underskilled, the innovation is not particularly useful for that. That's the second thing. But third and most importantly, teachability and compliance. Do the entrepreneurs show up? That's actually the number one biggest thing. Do the entrepreneurs show up at the end of the day? Because we can pick any business at the end of the day and it can work as long as the entrepreneur is willing to put in the work. And that's our number one determinant of whether a campaign actually.
How do you determine that?
So through the due diligence process,
Okay.
What happens is we're going to keep asking you for a bunch of documents. We're going to ask you to do certain things. And what we're doing in the back end is we're rating how quickly you respond to emails,
Okay.
how present you are in the process. And we also do reporting. Because we've cancelled a few campaigns because the entrepreneurs just weren't delivering what was required. And unwittingly, it made the crowd trust us even more because they're going, you're doing your work. You're not just saying everything is all hunky-dory. There are going to be failures. And we've had a pretty high success rate from an entrepreneur perspective. I mean, some stats say that 1 in 10 businesses make it past their first 3 years. So of the businesses we funded, 3 of the 8 that have done asset financing have actually paid out. 1 is paying out next year from March. It's the beehives. They take a year. And we think that's a pretty decent success because it's close to 50%.
Tell us about the other. So you've spoken about African Norsi,
Yeah.
the beekeeper.
Yeah.
What are the other types of entrepreneurs that you have on board?
Sure.
It's nice, very especially for people watching us
Yes,
this morning and
definitely.
thinking, well, that's the go-to person for me. I've had this idea for even a day, but did not have the funding. And here's someone who's going to talk to me.
Sure. So some of the other campaigns, we've got a company called Chef Cuts, run by Karabo. And what it does, it's an online vegetable delivery, chopped vegetable delivery system.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, so they chop up the vegetables for you, deliver a bag directly to your home. They currently operate in Midrand and Pretoria for 150 Rand. We've got MySurfer. MySurfer does affordable internet for, what's this thing called, for students, for student accommodation and that sort of thing. They give uncapped internet for as little as 250 for these. So what we did is we got the crowd to buy access points to install in buildings in Bloemfontein for a contract they had won, and then they are paying back the crowd 100 Rand per access point for the next
Okay, we've got 2 minutes to wrap up.
Yeah.
Challenges, and where do you see yourself, where do you see the People's Fund going 5 years' time?
Sure. Challenges. Number one challenge is entrepreneurs don't have accountants. That's the number one thing. That's the number one challenge.
And you don't support them. You don't have a support structure to help them.
We're developing support structures, but that's not our primary mandate. And I think the most important thing in this space is to focus on what you're good at. Don't try to do everything. So we're trying to set up these support structures in place. That's the first thing. And secondly, we do a lot of purchase order financing or trade financing, where entrepreneurs have contracts, they just don't have the upfront capital to execute on them. So where we see ourselves in the next 5 years is enabling entrepreneurs to deliver on time, improving corporate efficiency, and allowing the crowd to actually extract value.
And
from
you
this.
do, in fact, tell them this is what we actually test you guys on.
Yeah.
So see that you have your ducks in a
Sure.
row so that you can become successful.
Sure.
And if you're successful, then you're making the people happy.
Definitely, yeah. So we let all our entrepreneurs know exactly what the process is going to be like. The biggest hurdle is actually the due diligence process. People not passing the due diligence.
The people that are still waiting for
Yeah.
funding, 100 odd so people,
Yeah.
do you go back to them and tell them that you're not in a space to assist them now? They need to be patient. Are you going to eventually go back to them?
Sure. So we often respond and tell them why you're not qualifying, especially if it's on social media or via email. There is, as we grow, we're increasing our capacity to be able to deal with everyone because it took off faster than we were expecting.
Wow.
Right? So
And that's where we leave it,
No
unfortunately. That was obviously Luyanda Jafta talking about the People's Fund. And if you're a young upcoming entrepreneur and you're stuck for funding, these are the go-to people. Don't go away. We're going for an ad break and we'll be coming back to talk to you about the disease called lupus. Welcome back. We're now going to talk to Dr. Faeeza Nawab. Oh, I thought I'd do it. This is Faeeza Nawab's daughter. Her name is Dr. Faeeza Nawab, and I'm probably going to do that throughout the interview, so she just needs to rap me on my knuckles. Faeeza Nawab is a medical doctor. She works at Baragwanath Hospital, and she's here to talk to us about the disease called lupus. And why have we asked her to come in? Well, simply because she suffers from this condition, lupus. Being a medical doctor, I'd like to think she was better able to manage her disease, but she'll tell us how she coped, what was it that made her fight the disease, and why she is where she is today. Alhamdulillah, a picture of perfect health. Dr. Faeeza Nawab, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam.
Nice to have you here. By the way, your mom's going to be on my show on Saturday talking about something completely different, anger management. But you're here to talk about your condition, lupus. When were you diagnosed?
So I started off as being diagnosed with bleeding disorder called ITP when I was 14 and was treated for that for a few years, and around 6-7 years later I developed symptoms of lupus and was diagnosed with lupus then.
So that bleeding disorder you had, was it, do you think, related in any way to the lupus, or did that kind of lead up to you presenting with lupus?
So patients can present that way, have something in isolation which can lead to lupus. So it was one of maybe almost like a predisposition to
leading
lupus.
up to it. What is lupus?
So lupus is an autoimmune disease. It's basically when your immune system is activated and the antibodies that are produced attack your own cells. And this causes a kind of an inflammation and damage to the tissues and organs of your body. So it's almost like a self-destructive scenario whereby the immune system responds to foreign antigens or foreign bodies and creates this inappropriate response rather than what should happen.
How long have you been living with lupus?
It's probably over 20 years now.
Gosh, okay. When you were told that you are presenting with lupus symptoms, as you were qualified by then already, or were you still studying medicine?
I was studying. I was still studying, yeah.
How did you respond to that information? Did you know enough about lupus? Because every time something happens in these days, and in this day and age, the moment we need information, we go to Dr. Google. How did you respond, and did you believe that being a medical doctor, perhaps you'll be able to cope better?
So, like I said, I was diagnosed around, I think, 14 with the ITP first. So I'd already had what would be a chronic condition from then. So since I was...
Did you realize it was a precursor to lupus?
We weren't aware of that at that stage. But I was being treated for that for a long time before the lupus. And obviously having a medical background made a difference in me understanding things better, and medication, and information empowers anyone with any condition to face it better, I think, and understand it. So that definitely did help, yeah.
I guess you also need a very strong support system. It's fine, you were in a better position than perhaps most other people. Being a medical doctor, you truly understood the condition and you knew what's going to work and what's not going to work and how to manage it. I think more importantly is how to manage your condition. Tell us what exactly, and I'm wondering if there are different degrees of the disease. Do different people have different symptoms which flare up from time to time? What exactly was going wrong with you? when the lupus does flare up, how does it impact on your body, your mind, and just how do you cope?
So no two people will have the same kind of presentation or symptoms.
And degree, I should imagine.
And degree, exactly. It can range from mild symptoms like just maybe just a mild fever to very severe symptoms where maybe one of your organs are involved. Like in my case, my kidneys became affected with the lupus. So
when your kidneys were affected, what was happening to you? How sick were you at the time?
So at that stage, obviously it presents as how kidney diseases may present. I had swelling of my face, swelling of my legs, and when my kidneys were affected, I was qualified. It was actually the year after. So obviously I understood and then went to see my physician, and we took it from there. But my initial presentation was that of the malar rash that maybe many people who suffer from lupus may have had, which is almost like a butterfly rash on the face. And that's one of the more obvious, signs of lupus. The other signs and symptoms may mimic a lot of other conditions, from something as, easy to treat as the flu. You'd be presenting to the GP for, but after many doctor visits, you need to look back and reassess what is actually going on with you. So that's how I presented. Yeah.
And how long did it take when you presented with, your kidneys being affected with a kidney infection, I should imagine? How long did it take for you to get better, to get over that episode? Because from what I understand, and you have indicated that it differs from patient to patient, that you're not going to live with that condition for months on end. Perhaps in some situations you do. How long was that episode? How long did you have to live with that particular episode?
Okay. So the initial presentation, like I said, was the rash, and then I had a lot of joint involvement, which is also another common presenting condition in patients with lupus.
Painful joints.
Very painful, inflamed joints, and fatigue, and I had other blood disorders like anemia with it. And after a few years with that, I then developed the swelling, and then obviously a kidney biopsy was done, and the nephritis, lupus nephritis, was diagnosed. And I got put onto treatment, and alhamdulillah, I responded very well to that treatment. For over 2 years, I was put on treatment, and then I went into subsequent remission, which is what happens in lupus. You have your flares, and then you have periods of remission when you're relatively well with just minor symptoms.
Alhamdulillah. Now, when you had that flare-up, the kidney flare-up, how debilitating was that? Did you have to kind of, were you housebound, were you in bed, or with treatment, were you still able to be pretty active?
So it was the year of my internship, the first year of my internship. So
do you think the stress might have brought it on?
Most definitely, probably had some kind of influence on that. But it was the first year of my internship, and I just got married that same year.
Oh, so goodness, too much happening in your life.
Yes. So obviously I had to be admitted to hospital. And I recovered from that, and once put on treatment, I was able to go back to work. Although the treatment for lupus and its conditions is immunosuppressive, so you're more likely to pick up infection, and you always need to be cautious. Obviously, working in a hospital environment, that was inevitable. So I developed chicken pox after that, yes. And then had to be put off for a while. So that's how that year went. Just with its ups and downs. But
and the marriage still went ahead, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, the marriage went ahead. And that was
What about pregnancies? I'm wondering, and I know you have 2 children, but is it a risk for women suffering from lupus?
So your ability to fall pregnant isn't compromised by the lupus. Or your fertility. What
the actual pregnancy
problem is the problem is when you do fall pregnant, then there's a high risk of miscarriages, preterm labor, and possible flare-up of your disease, which happened to me in my second pregnancy, and then postpartum complications. So that was the second time the lupus nephritis flared, was after, possibly during and after the pregnancy.
Okay, let's go for an ad break. When we come back, let's pick up on the postpartum complications and how to live with lupus, how to make the best of this bad situation that you might be in. Dr. Faeeza Nawab is my guest. We're talking about lupus. She's a medical doctor, obviously, and she's talking about how she copes with the condition. She works at Baragwanath Hospital, and alhamdulillah, she has a very, very full life. She's married with 2 children. So really, as Muslims, I think we must put our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and know that if we are positive, then everything can turn out fine. We're talking to Dr. Faeeza Nawab about the condition that she suffers from, and that is lupus. We're going to try and unpack as much as we possibly can in the final segment of the show. Now, Faeeza, when we talk lupus, are we talking of a chronic disease? Are you going to live with this for the rest of your life?
Yes, lupus.
Even though you spoke about flare-ups and remission.
Sure. So lupus is a chronic disease, but like you just said, there are periods where you have your flares and then it goes into remission where you're fairly well. But it is a chronic disease that's probably then activated by certain triggers.
What would those triggers be?
So the main one for me may have been this stress. So environmental factors like infections, the stress is a big one, and then obviously pregnancy is another trigger. There is probably other things, but research still needs to be done on what is the exact cause for the lupus. But generally, patients will react to one or the other.
And I guess it's different from
stages.
Patient to patient.
Sure.
Now, what about diet? Because I read somewhere that, for example, tomatoes, there was a list of foods on that list. I can't remember all of them, but definitely tomatoes jumps out at me. Do you agree with that? Or, is when we talk diet, is it really diet? Is one needs to watch diet and lifestyle for any condition or disease?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know of anything or any food specific to lupus that would actually help it or not. But a healthy lifestyle and exercise is good for anyone, and just to maintain a general, healthy self. You should be eating healthy and doing your exercise. But I don't know of any specific food that could affect the lupus or help it. But I'm sure patients who have been taking certain things claim that that helps them with certain symptoms or make them feel better.
Lupus patients, even though it's a chronic disease, do not necessarily have to be on chronic medication for life. They're only on their meds, whatever the meds is, when there is a flare-up. But there's also the probably thinking, and I'm not sure you're the doctor and you are a lupus sufferer, you'd be able to tell us, why is there almost this suggestion that there's some sort of correlation between lupus and cancer?
So yes, lupus patients are on treatment and can be chronically on treatment, whether it's just the plasmaquine or not, or maybe certain treatments to treat different organs that are affected. But as for the correlation or direct relation between lupus and cancer, I don't think there's any direct cause. I think it may be as a consequence of certain drugs that the patient's taking long term that could possibly,
Which is similar to cancer
predisposing
drugs.
factor for cancer, yes.
Okay. We're talking, and I'll go back to the question about it being a chronic disease, but that doesn't mean you've got to be on chronic meds for the rest of your life. You only go on your meds when there's a flare-up.
Not necessarily, it just depends. Like I said, every patient's different, and obviously seeing their treating physician who would recommend what they need to be on to actually keep the disease in remission as well. So during a flare, you may be on a certain regimen, and then for maintenance, you may be on a certain regimen. And there could be times when you're not on anything, but that's obviously between patient and doctor.
Right.
And you would make that, the doctor would make that decision.
So do you have a multidisciplinary team, healthcare providers that you interact with your condition, or do you just have your one specialist that is looking after you?
So generally at the beginning, you would obviously see a rheumatologist, which is a specialist physician who deals with these autoimmune diseases. And then if you do develop certain organ involvement, like the kidneys, for example, you'd be referred to a nephrologist. But the doctors obviously work together, and when they need to make decisions regarding your treatment, then they will discuss this. But it's generally a specialist physician who you would be seeing.
You are a medical doctor, no doubt. You had a treatment plan in place given to you by a physician, and as a doctor you obviously stuck with it, and alhamdulillah you're well on the road to recovery. Are there any side effects one should worry about from the different meds? And we do know, again, we stress that it's different from patient to patient, depends, which organ has been affected. What would your best advice be to people watching us this morning who might be suffering from lupus in terms of your treatment plan and meds and possible side effects, how you deal with that? We've talked diet already, but anything very specific you'd like to share with other people?
So obviously it is difficult to take medication every day of your life. And the medications don't come without their side effects, especially if you're on a prednisone, cortisone regimen. Patients will tell you they blow up. It doesn't look aesthetically pleasing.
Of course.
They don't.
Twice their size eventually.
Yes. Although it obviously will help. It makes you feel better. And then the other drugs which will suppress the immune system, and you need to be cautious because you can obviously contract other infections more easily, from the environment to other people. So you need to be careful about this. So there are those downsides, but obviously to keep the lupus in remission, you need to take your medication regularly and consistently, have regular check-ins with your doctor, and make sure that everything's okay. If you're feeling unwell, have it checked before it progresses too far.
How regularly do you see your physician?
So
even though you're in remission now?
Yes, so for now, 6 monthly visits are good enough because I'm okay. But obviously, when you are going through a flare, you would be seeing your doctor more regularly.
Obviously. You spoke about major organs being involved. In your case, it's the kidneys. Can the heart be involved as well?
Yeah, sure. The heart can be involved. You can get fluid around the lungs and the heart, and this could affect the heart function. And then you'd obviously be referred to a cardiologist. Is any one of the I guess they all play their part and they're all important, but would you say that perhaps having the heart flaring up as as one of the organs being affected more serious than a kidney, or is it really difficult? I don't think there's one.
You can't minimize anything.
In lupus, the kidney is one of the main target organs, and you need to preserve that function because if it's untreated, mortality can be quite high. So you need to look out for the danger signs like the swelling. You may need to test your urine for protein in the urine, and look for those signs so that you could see your doctor sooner rather than later.
And I
they
imagine
arrive.
you're very vigilant about all of that.
Well, I do take notice, and maybe being a doctor, I could recognize things sooner than just letting it go. But I've learned to, look for those warning signs and then have it seen to, yes.
Tell us about those warning signs. You're on top of it. You've been through it long enough. What can you share with the viewers just to be really alert if they are suffering, if they're obviously being diagnosed with this autoimmune disease at some point in their life? Going forward, if they are in remission, they mustn't think that all is well, because it could flare up at any time. But what type of warning signs should they be looking out for and shouldn't dismiss?
Yeah, so obviously you can't predict the cause of lupus. You never know at what point the trigger would be there. So you need to, if you're having very high fevers, you need to have it seen to. Obviously you'll have joint swelling, and you'll be able to recognize that. With the kidneys, like I said, it's the swelling of your feet, the swelling of your face. You learn to know your body, and you know what is out of the ordinary.
Listen to your body.
Right. And that's what you should do. And it's no harm just having it checked. There are blood tests you could do, and to maybe indicate that there's active disease going on, and then you take it from there.
Is there any population group perhaps, or does it present more in women than in men? And can it present in younger children? And if it does in younger children, what age are we looking at, and how deadly is it in the younger child? So that's about 4 questions I've thrown at you.
Okay, so 9 out of 10 times women are affected more than men.
Do we know why?
We're not sure. Like I said, the causes, the research still being done. It could be a hormonal predisposition, the estrogen. There are different factors that could be, but women are definitely more affected than men. But men can be affected as well. And children can be affected. It's obviously a more severe form in children, and it's probably more difficult.
Deadly?
Well, untreated, it just depends on how the lupus and what organs it affects. And then in adults and in children, it can lead to mortality. It's just that it can be controlled, and 90% of the time you will have a healthy, normal lifestyle. It's that 10% that you need to be looking for these warning signs and having yourselves checked and treated.
Inshallah. So let's end on that good news. Anything else you want to share with our viewers before we wrap up?
I just think, you need to have a positive outlook on any disease. Disease and illness comes from Allah.
Absolutely.
The cure is with Him, and enduring it, the reward is with Him as well.
Absolutely.
So with lupus especially, you just need to know your body, know your limitations. You can do anything like anyone else. You just may not be able to do everything all at once.
Absolutely. So don't be a superwoman.
Don't be so hard on yourself, and just take each day as it comes. And inshallah, you'll get through it just fine.
Ameen, ameen. And we make dua, inshallah, for your continued health and for the lupus to be in total remission, inshallah.
Ameen.
And there you have it from the good doctor herself, Faeeza Nawab, a medical doctor based at Baragwanath Hospital in Johannesburg, talking about her journey through lupus. It's not over. We know that it's a chronic disease. It may flare up at some time, but our du'as is that, inshallah, it remains in remission. Just listen to your body in the moment you don't feel that, you don't feel right. Get yourself to a medical practitioner as soon as possible. And on that note, then we wrap up. Thank you indeed to the hardworking production team and to you for your company for this morning. Till the next time, as always, please take care on the roads. And as always, it is Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali.
يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حني قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا